meeting the order Friday, October 9th, 2015, Planning and Zoning Committee. Call the roll.
Curtis?
Here.
Sure.
Here.
Joyce?
What?
Joyce?
Here.
Anderson?
Present.
Okay. Any public comments this morning? Seeing none, we'll go to the Planning and Zoning Office report, which I believe Mr. Anderson is going to deliver to us.
Yep, should have in front of you, paper clip packet. I was delivered about an hour ago. It was delivered to me, I should say.
Do you want one?
Looked to me like it was pretty normal, like every other month, except they added in a letter concerning the Regional Planning Commission. I don't know where you're gonna, what you wanted to push down a little farther on the list. Press that then.
Okay, I guess anyone have any questions about the report from the zoning office? Now we'll move on to a discussion on enforcement of ordinances. This is something we've had on the agenda for several months now. It's been a source of frustration, not only I think for this committee and the zoning function of the county, but I suppose for all functions of the county and all the ordinances that we have. Do you have any comments, Mr. Devine, on what we can do to improve on that?
I mean, it takes money, is what it is. I mean, there's some properties that I know need to be condemned, but then what's the point of condemning them if we have no money to tear it down? There's a particular house in rural Ashland, it's Elizabeth Brown's house. It's actually an old lemon anger house. Totally dilapidated, needs to be torn down. Property needs to be cleaned up. There was old abandoned cars there, all kinds of junk. And I was approached by a couple of guys in the 20s actually that were familiar with this property and were willing to do it. Of course, they wanted to pay. And so I said, you know, once we get some money to pay you, I will call you. I still have your information. You know, there's an order that I have, a court order on this trailer near Loda, outside of Loda, that's been sitting there for years. Again, the order is to have it removed. And there's no money to remove it. I talked to Gloria when she was here, and there's never been any money to get that trailer removed and clean up that property, because that's another dilapidated house, and there's an abandoned motorboat there, and all things that need to be disposed of and cleaned up. But we've never had any money. So that really is what drives this process, having some money.
Can you do anything to the owner of it, if you find out who owns it?
Yeah, and we know who owns it, but you know, she has no money. I mean, that's why it's sitting there abandoned. And she actually, this particular trailer, she used to live in it, now she doesn't. It's sitting there empty. And Stephen was the last one, I forgot, Rosemary Stephen. And I've talked to her on the phone many times. She's a very nice lady, but she has no money. We could put a lien on it, but that's really not going to get us anywhere.
I guess unless something has happened in the last 6 months or so, there's also one in Delray that's...
Yeah, I know, yeah, Terry Iman has made me aware of that. That's been ongoing for years also.
Yeah.
You know, I'm happy to do the enforcement on it if there was going to be some consequences to enforce the enforcement.
What are the options on it, Jim? I mean, years ago, just after we got away from square wheels, I lived as a kid out in rural Kankakee County, and in cases like that, we made deals with the local volunteer fire departments to use them for training exercises.
They don't do that as much anymore. Liability reasons. We've approached them in the past in doing that, and have not been successful. I know what Seeker would do it, won't do it anymore. I think Martinson was approached on a property years ago. I mean, it was 5 or 6 years ago. Not something we're interested in. At least at that time. And maybe times have changed, but you just don't see it being done anymore.
And even if you burn them down, you still have to clean up. You got a lot of cleanup you have to do.
Well, and the other problem is too, I mean, they're concerned about asbestos and toxins that get emitted in the air. And EPA going to have a problem with that. I think that might be part of their concern. Is the government's watchdogs of what to do of the asbestos siding or asbestos shingles or asbestos tile in the house. What do we do with that? It's got to be disposed of by the approved asbestos remover. So that's been an inhibiting problem too. Not like the old days where we would burn it and dig a hole, put it in there, and walk away.
So the only source of money then would be if the county board established a fund or something for it and levied for it, or...
Oh, that'd be a lot of money. That'd be a lot of money.
Well,
30,000?
It depends on how much you want to set aside. I mean, you can maybe start with 15, and we don't have to do all the properties in 1 year. Just maybe start a program of appropriating some amount of money to begin some of the property. I mean, if we never appropriate any money, it's just not going to get done. And if there's some appropriation for some money to get some of these properties cleaned up, then that's a start. It's going to be a continuing ongoing.
Well, I guess, since we're talking about that particular ordinance, I guess there is a part of it where maybe the county needs to recognize some responsibility in that, even though it's primarily the homeowners or the property owner's responsibility. But I think these are issues that every village in town, in the state, and the country is faced as they get older.
Right.
And, you get to a point where there are safety and health hazards involved. There are just eyesores and other things as well that contribute to the deterioration of neighborhoods and what have you. Some places I know where they've torn down places, they've tried to resell them to people to put a new home up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's worked in some cases, but a lot of them it hasn't. But I'm just curious, the only source of revenue or money that we would have would be for the county board to set a fund aside.
Right.
Well, and the county doesn't want to end up with the land that the house is on, right?
Right, and that's why it's preferred you get a court order to demolish, and then the property can be,
Whatever,
in the landowner's name, remain in the landowner's name, but the county has the right to go in there and demolish it, and we pay for it, and maybe we can slap a lien on the property.
Yeah,
too.
put a lien on the property.
Right.
If you re-put that back in the fund, do another one.
Right.
If the property sells for more than that fund.
You need to enforce the lien, which is a legal procedure, which can be done.
I guess as far as the county appropriating your money, we're too far down the road with the budget for the next year at this point, so it'd be something we'd have to be considered a year from now, or 6 months from now,
Yeah.
whenever, but... What about some of the other ordinances that we have as far as enforcement goes with those?
Like what?
We're going to talk about the kennel ordinance in a little bit. What about with that? How do we enforce that ordinance?
Used to do it through zoning, and we really don't have a zoning department anymore, so we don't have the bodies to do it. I mean, that used to be something that Gloria would do with animal control.
How much authority would they have in a situation like that if we had people in a position to go out and do that?
To enforce our zoning ordinances, I mean, We've done administrative search warrants before and prosecuted people for zoning violations based on, under the Animal Cruelty Act, but if it's so warranted, we've done several of those through the years, in conjunction with Gloria and Animal Control, basically Doc Snell when he was here. And so that's certainly a capability that we have of enforcing it. We need cooperative people to do it.
That's something that Mr. Yerger could do though, is it not?
Good, sure.
Well, I mean, I don't have a list of all the ordinances we have in effect, not only through this committee, but other committees as well. We have ordinances in the health department, for example, and, that questions come up there also about enforcing those.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes with noxious weeds and dilapidated properties and trash accumulation. I mean, I get some of those from Terry from time to time. Sometimes it just kind of takes care of itself, but the other times, again, I can get a court order ordering them to clean it up. And that's, I think, an exercise in futility if you have nothing to back it up. I mean, if they're not going to clean it up, that's why it accumulated in the first place. If we've got no resources to do it on our own, what's the point? That's been my position.
If you get a court order for somebody to clean up their property and they refuse to do it, is there a way of levying a fine against them?
There is. It could be contempt of court if you went that route. Like in the Stevens case, I didn't pursue that because she doesn't have the money. And generally, you're going to be dealing with people that have no money. So getting a fine against them is an exercise in futility.
If they don't pay the fine, then you can.
Judge isn't going to put an 80-year-old woman in jail. Trust me. And I would. So.
I understand.
You have to be selective about what it is, what battles you want to fight, I guess. And that's really where it lies. It's a collective effort of deciding which battles do we really want to go after. And I used to have that relationship with Gloria to pick properties that we would pursue. And Stevens was one of them, rural other. And I just never went anywhere because simply didn't have money, despite the court order for her to remove that trailer.
Well, sounds like there's no easy answer to the problem. But
There isn't. I mean, again, I think we need to pick our battles. We need to know what properties need to be, what do we want as a priority to go after for cleanup or dilapidated property that needs to be cleaned up. If we have, if you want to articulate through Bob, that or Terry Diamond or both, I have no problem in pursuing that. There's just really never been hadn't been a coordinated effort to pursue this in many years.
Yeah, but if we start picking and choosing when we're going to enforce these, then you're going to have people saying, well, you're not enforcing it against so-and-so, but you're enforcing it against me, you're discriminating against me.
Yeah, but bring it on. We can't do it all. We only have so much time, so many resources, so much money. I find that never bothered me.
I think that's a bridge you have to cross when you come to it.
That's just part of it. I don't think that should stop us from enforcing ordinances if we have a list of priority places we want to pursue.
Okay, I guess we'll move on to the next item, the Regional Planning Commission. Looks like we have a letter in front of us from a gentleman by the name of Ted Horner. If you haven't had a chance to look at it or read it, I guess now would be a good time to do that. Are you familiar with this letter?
I got this yesterday.
Was it just fixed yesterday, or did this come? I remember him.
I wish there was a date on this.
I remember there being a letter when we did away with it.
Yeah, and
Pretty sure
anyway,
it's just reproduced.
I finally found when the county board did vote to do away with regional planning. It was February of 2013. So I did find that. It is in our ordinance. I mean, I think here's my take on regional planning. Reading the statute, the county has the opportunity to create a regional planning commission and follow the rules promulgated by the ordinance or by the statute. In my opinion, I think you have the right to dissolve it the way you did back in February of 2013. There's no mandate that says you have to have regional planning. If you have zoning, it doesn't say you have to have regional planning. I think it's discretionary of the county board. This letter by Ted, obviously I wasn't around in the position I am now, 1972. I was 11 years old. I didn't really care or know, or care to know. But, I mean, and I don't doubt that Ted is accurate perhaps in his statement, although there's nothing to back this up, as far as this being a part of the HUD grants that created the original ordinance back in 1972. I have no reason to disbelieve that, but I don't think it trumps the county's discretion to do away with regional planning if they so desire. There's no paperwork that says that the federal government is going to do anything to us if we do away with regional planning. So I think we still have that right to do so. And you've done it, basically. I kept it in the ordinance because I could never find, when this ordinance was redone, where it was actually disposed of. I heard that it was, and I never found it. So when we redid the ordinances, I left the regional planning part in. That's why it's in our ordinances now. We can do a couple of things. We can leave it in and just not have regional planning like we've not had since 2011, or we can vote, or if you want me to take it out and contact the municipal code folks through Lisa Fancher, I'll do that. It's whatever the board wants to do. Or we can change it and kind of keep it, but not have the mandates that we have to meet 12 times a year and things like that. Maybe we can meet as the board is necessary.
What would be your recommendation?
I'd like to keep it and maybe have it flexible. I mean, I think it's a good idea to have an opportunity, or take the opportunity periodically to review your zoning ordinances and your comprehensive plan as times change. I mean, maybe now we're not getting a lot of inquiries of subdivisions coming here to Clay County, but we still need to be prepared to do that when the economy hopefully rebounds going on. And have a regional planning commission to review those applications. But, as it was, every zoning application went to regional planning. And I went to enough of those meetings where all regional planning did, I don't know if you ever went to those, Charlie, or not.
Yeah.
Is they tell people how to get around the zoning ordinance to make their zoning application fit with the zoning plan. And I don't think that's not the regional planning wisdom, to give advice about how to get around the zoning ordinance. But just to, incorporate how does this zoning change fit with our overall zoning rules in a comprehensive way. So I think they kind of lost their way the past few years of their existence. And it was another layer of application that somebody had to go through in order to get something rezoned. So I have mixed feelings about whether it should stay or not. The way it was operating at the end, the last few years, it was not the way it should have been.
If we took it out, we would still have the option to put it back in at some time in the
Absolutely.
future if the need arose.
Yes.
I mean, this thing came up when we were reviewing the subdivision ordinance. We can leave it in there too if we want, but because, like what you're saying, the main purpose or place it might have would be if someone did want to build a subdivision.
Right.
I think, I guess I don't know about that Belmont Acres. Is that considered a subdivision that's in the county?
Belmont Acres is, yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's conceivable there could be another one or two pop up sometime down the road.
And I think if you had a chance to redo Belmont Acres, you'd do it differently because you've got, it's a busy road and you've got access to those houses off of a busy road. And if you're going to have a subdivision, you want to have a frontage road where people turn into a subdivision and you're not, having school buses stop, at 12 houses in a row on a busy road. Same thing on Route 1, north of Route 1 at Watsika. You've got all those houses off of Route 1, and you've got school buses stopping on Route 1. It's not a well-planned way to zone houses in a rural area. And that's what regional planning could do, but, you know, is to stop that kind of development.
Does anybody on the committee have any thoughts about what we ought to do?
In the code, we need to have it, or not? Like, can it sit in there idle, do
You
nothing
can.
like it has been?
Like it has been, yeah. I mean, nobody's gonna, you know, tell you, oh, you've got it on the books, that's what you have to do.
What's this guy's complaint, really? I mean,
Ted was instrumental in getting zoning in Iroquois County,
Mhm.
and for years he was the zoning officer in Iroquois County. I think in the 1980s, 70s and 80s, he was the zoning officer. I think he held that position, it was a paid position. So I think zoning is near and dear to him, and so I think he's got this history of why it was all created the way it was, and I think he wants it to stay the way it should be. I don't read his letter as any kind of requirement that the town board keep regional planning. I think they don't want it. And you have voted to disband it, which I think is valid idea.
So we don't even have to act on this, huh?
I don't think so, to be honest with you.
So if we keep things the way they are, then as far as the subdivision ordinance, we need to keep the regional planning commission in there, the way that was stated before.
Yeah, I think if we really wanted to be, if you want to keep regional planning on the books, I would maybe tweak the meetings and rules, and maybe have that tweaked so that you meet periodically or meet as needed. Because it makes me a little nervous to have, you know, shall meet no less than 12 times a year, meeting regularly, and so forth. Perhaps it's, do a text amendment saying that regional planning commission shall be created, and when created, shall meet as needed, as determined by the Iroquois County Board, or reports to that effect.
If we were to have a regional planning commission, they'd have to be appointed by the county board chairman.
Correct, and
There's
approved by the county board.
nobody serving in that capacity right now.
Right. It's really, it's an idle part of the statute that's not being enforced or not being recognized. I don't see a problem with it as it is. But if somebody wants to put a subdivision in, you know, and it becomes controversial, that's where the problem is. We need to, then they may ding us for not being.
I think one of our intents in reviewing the subdivision ordinance, because it appeared to me when I read through it that it's kind of like a blueprint that a person would have to follow in order to put a subdivision in, kind of step by step. First you do this, then you do that, and so
Right.
forth. And that was where the regional planning commission question came up, because they're not there, you know, should those people come to the zoning committee or zoning office, or
Right.
how all that would be done.
Yeah, it's a little unknown about what somebody should do administratively in order to get it.
But if we, let's say that John Doe comes in next week and says, I want to put in a subdivision, and we're going to say, well, whoa, wait a minute, we got to reappoint a regional planning commission, and it's
Yeah.
going to take 6 months, or to find people to serve in that capacity. I mean, is that what we want to do too?
Doesn't sound reasonable, does it?
It could be in a month, you could find enough people to serve, but
Right.
whatever length of time it takes, you're telling somebody, wait a minute, you can't do that.
Right.
That would be the problem I guess I would have with leaving it idle and reactivating it at a time when somebody decided that they wanted to do something.
so what are you saying? You think we should go ahead and reactivate it, basically, have the chairman appoint people to the committee?
Maybe we can structure the ordinance in such a way that if somebody wants to make that application, that they would come to the zoning office and maybe present it to the zoning committee initially, and then it would be referred to the regional planning commission for further action or whatever, and that would give enough time maybe to get a regional planning commission put into place. It's the only
Yeah.
way I can think off the top of my head here.
Then whatever their thoughts was, they would come back then to us.
Right.
Yeah, and ultimately it always does, or it
Yeah,
always has to
right.
do.
And that was the reason, because the regional planning commission wasn't in place, why not just start here in the first place?
Right.
But,
Can it just be laid out in the subdivision ordinance that you have to have a
Yeah, it's
front of
spelled
the
out.
road and whatever. It just seems like another layer. I think that was the intent of getting rid of it.
I agree. It was essentially another zoning board of appeals, kind of, you know.
One more step for these people to go.
With another month.
Is there any Illinois law saying we have to have?
No. There's no requirement to have.
I'll put a motion up to scrap it, get rid of it.
I'll tell you what, it's already been scrapped, essentially. If you want me to have municipal code take this out, and take it out everywhere that it appears in our other ordinances, such as the subdivision ordinance, I can do that.
I guess I lean towards just changing it and putting it, will meet as needed. As needed could be never.
Sure. At the discretion of the county board.
We can do whatever, but then that would be where I would go.
So we need a vote on that?
Maybe in the form of like a text amendment, yeah, to change the verbiage to mean as needed. Just to get simple fix.
So would that follow the other procedures like we had with the wind ordinance, as a text amendment, that we would do it here and then go to the board, then go to ZBA, and then back here again?
Text amendments, it needs to go to ZBA if it's a material change in your zoning ordinance. I don't think changing this is a material change. If you're going from meeting 12 times a year to meeting as needed.
Did it go to the ZBA when we disbanded it?
Did we not?
I don't think that would be a more of a
Yeah, I
material
agree.
change than this.
I agree.
Material change.
I do agree with that. So they would have, I know they would have thought it, and I didn't see any minutes. I think it was simply, when I read the minutes, it was Dan making a motion, hey, we haven't met in 2 years, and regional planning hasn't met in 2 years. I forgot who seconded it, and it was unanimous by the zoning board at that time. No, when the county board got passed, I mean, that's basically what happened.
Okay. You want to restructure your motion? Have it made as a text amendment to put the regional planning commission on an as-needed basis? And then that would take it out of the subdivision ordinance? Is that what we'd be saying, or leaving it in?
I'd have to look at the subdivision ordinance to see what it says, but part of that says that they've got to go through regional planning first, I presume.
I believe so, yes. I don't have it with me this morning, unfortunately.
Okay.
but I believe that's correct.
I'd do that, John. My thing there is, and it'd be up to Kyle, though, I think if you're gonna leave that in there, where you're gonna have a zoning, regional commission, I don't think you wait until something happens and then scramble trying to get people. I think you need to go ahead and place people now, so when something happens, you're ready and prepared to deal with it.
Is there any requirement on how many people have to serve on the regional planning commission, or who they are?
Well, our statute does, is they have the county superintendent of highways, which is actually misnamed, it should be a county engineer, regional superintendent of schools, which is another, that harkens back to the 70s when we had a regional superintendent of schools in Newbury County. Chairperson of the county board's planning and zoning committee, or a member of the committee is designated by the chairperson. And then it has 12 other persons appointed by the chairperson of the county board, subject to confirmation by the county board. And then there's a lot, yeah.
Regional superintendent of schools encompasses several people, doesn't it?
Well, it would be,
We got like in the southwest corner of the county, we're in the PBL school district.
yeah, this is old when it used to be just Iroquois County.
Right, I know,
So,
but I mean, we got
Yeah.
other school
You're right.
districts that come into the county that are outside the county, so we'd have to change that part of it also.
Unless you had, who's the guy who's in charge of IQ?
Murphy. Greg Murphy.
Yeah, Greg.
Greg Murphy?
Yeah. I forgot what his title is.
They're talking about a lot of people that are already on a lot of committees, and apparently they didn't deem it real necessary when we disbanded this. I mean, there wasn't much of a...
Hue and cry out there.
Yeah.
No.
You want to table this till next meeting, or?
Oh, we can, I guess it's been on here long enough, I'd like to get it cleaned up if we could, to be honest with you. And we
Well, if
table
you
it
wanted
about-
to go ahead and disband, I mean, Kyle makes a good point, did it go through zoning board of appeals? No, but it's been disbanded essentially, and it's been effectively disbanded for 4 years. I could just take it out. And, maybe that's a cleaner way of handling it, if we're just gonna not treat it regularly as an integral part of zoning and planning, then we'll just take it out.
I mean, I guess I tend to favor that in that if in the subdivision ordinance, if there's a reason that somebody wants to put a subdivision in and that by coming to this committee, that isn't gonna work, to me, that would identify the need that we have a regional planning commission.
Or you can commit, you can commission, a special regional planning subcommittee through the county board if you wanted to have, outside people, get an engineer, get the county engineer, get citizens throughout the county, if you wanted to do that, and give you some flexibility.
I guess, with all the things that we've discussed here in the last few minutes, it seems to me like that, something like that would make more sense, at least for the immediate future is concerned. Because as you pointed out, we take it out of the municipal code completely, we still have the option to put it back in.
Sure you can at some point.
So, it just seems to me that anybody that wanted to put in a subdivision, it can be handled by this committee, at least initially, and I'm sure we, in the process of doing so, we want to have the county engineer involved and
Oh,
different
absolutely.
things of that sort
Right.
before we gave final approval, so it just seems to me that this committee is equipped to handle it already, that maybe this is the way we should go. If you want to either restructure your motion or clarify it, we can proceed.
I can clarify it.
Okay.
My motion was, let's go ahead and disband it, take it out of the code.
Which it essentially has. I mean, really, just tell me to work with Lisa to remove it from our municipal code, or have municipal code folks remove this from our ordinance. And then,
I think that's what we should, I'll make a motion to do that.
I don't even think
I'll
we'll
second.
second.
Any second? Okay, call the roll, please.
Curtis?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes?
Joyce?
Yes.
Anderson?
Okay. Nuisance ordinance. I don't know how many people have had an opportunity to look at the nuisance ordinance since our last meeting. I'll be the first one to confess that I haven't.
What is a nuisance?
So maybe we can talk a little bit about it and then table it till the next meeting, I guess, so. I guess what considers a nuisance, one of the things probably would be what we talked about a few minutes ago about enforcing ordinances. In other words, people that have dilapidated properties and so forth, that's a nuisance. Probably another thing that constitutes a nuisance might be somebody that's conducting some sort of an operation on their property that's a problem for their neighbors.
Or barking dog?
Barking dogs.
I mean, it could include a lot of things.
Right, exactly. I got a copy of the ordinance here. Like I said, I didn't have a chance to really go through it before, but there's, right on the first page, are definitions. Disorderly conduct, unlawful use of weapons, mob action, discharge of a firearm, gambling, manufacture and delivery of a controlled substance, assault and battery, sexual abuse, public indecency, prostitution, criminal damage to property, possession, cultivation, manufacture, delivery of cannabis, illegal consumption or possession of alcohol. A lot of things that constitute a nuisance. None of them has to do with what we said before about having a dilapidated property, so I don't know if that's something we want to include in there or not, but it seems to me it might be worthy of consideration because that is a nuisance.
Well, I guess I don't understand that, because a lot of that stuff, you happen out on the street, we got laws for that. I was thinking if it aggravated your neighbor, you were doing something to aggravate, that's what I'd call a nuisance. If I'm on the street doing something wrong, the police are going to arrest me. Right? I mean, it still could be a nuisance, but that's what we have the police for. And when you mentioned that, I thought you meant if I was
Well, the
harming my neighbor.
first paragraph here says, any certain property within the county of Iroquois which becomes a chronic nuisance property is in violation of this chapter and is subject to its remedies.
Okay, what's nuisance property then?
Well, I read them off to you.
Yeah,
That's
but you
what
read
people are doing.
everything that the law has to enforce.
Okay. I guess what I would suggest to do is all of us to study this more carefully and we'll table it till the
Yeah,
next meeting. And because I think what you're saying has merit. I think what we talked about earlier about properties that are not kept up and so forth is something I would think would fall in this category and so forth. So if anybody has any objection to that, why, we'll table that till the next meeting. That takes us to the kennel ordinance. One of the things that I brought up the last meeting about the kennel ordinance is that, number one, some of this is my own viewpoints, but it really talks primarily only about dogs. It doesn't talk about any other animals like cats or snakes or birds or whatever, rabbits or whatever other kind of animals a person might have on their property. It also talks about, as far as dogs, that if you have more than 4 dogs, you have to have a kennel license. Nobody seems to know where the number 4 came from.
I think it came from the statute, actually. I took a lot of this when I wrote this 15 years ago on the animal control statutes.
Of the state, they still have 4 dogs.
I haven't looked at it since then, but I believe that's where I got that number. Plus, I relied heavily on Dr. Fennell. Because at this time, John, there were a lot of, I don't know if any of you were on the board at that time, back in the early 2000s, but we had some big operators of dogs. I mean, they were just hoarding dogs is what they were doing. In fact, as public defender back in the 90s, I had to defend one of these gals who, she was a hoarder. They lived a pigsty life out in the country, had well over 100 cats, and probably 30, 40 dogs. And you couldn't take care of them, had no money to take care of them. Social Security was their only income. And that's kind of what got this going was, you know, if it wasn't in the statute, that number would have come from Doc Fennell saying, I think this is a reasonable number that we need to start with as far as limiting how many dogs somebody should have before they need a license. So that's where that would have come from. But I don't think it was arbitrary. It would have been based, if not on the statute, it would have been based on his experience and what we were going through at that time. We really haven't had any problems in the last several years with people hoarding dogs, and other than Miss Pointer in the Clifton area. But other than her, we really haven't had any problems from that note.
Is there any process or procedure in this ordinance that if somebody had more than 4 dogs and wanted to get a variance, that they didn't have to have a kennel license, that they could do so?
And not get a kennel license? I don't think so. I think kennel license is pretty specific. If you got 4 or more, then you presume you need a kennel license.
We had a case like that about 6 years ago. And we stood, they had
Confirm on it. Yeah.
come up here, and I think we lied constantly when we were here.
It says,
Oh, we only had it for a weekend, because it's more relevant, so.
Yeah.
it says more than 4
Right.
right now.
Okay.
I have 4.
Okay.
I know people.
You're teetering, John.
Hmm?
You're teetering on the border.
Well,
Suppose they have pups.
hmm?
Yeah, Ernie.
You got about 10 then.
Then you better get rid of them within 48 hours, or we're going to be on your
Ernie will go after it, won't we?
I believe it says in here, if one of them has pups, you have a certain amount of time for them to mature and then so forth. And I had, the only time in my life I did it, and won't do it ever again, but 2 years ago we had some pups. Something that some of our friends wanted us to do.
Well, that's a thing right there. If you have a dog that has pups, you're automatically over your allotted number.
Yeah.
You know, you
I
have
mean, it
certain-
doesn't necessarily mean you're a commercial breeder or anything else. The 2 things I'm thinking as I'm listening to you is, one, buying a kennel license doesn't mean I'm gonna take care of them no matter how many I've got.
Yes, it
And
does.
two, I think there's, in my opinion, like John's got his hunting dogs, you know, you can have 2 or 3 aged dogs that you're out competing on, and maybe 1 or 2 younger dogs coming up in the training process, and now you're over, you have to go buy a kennel license like you're the same as a professional breeder or a professional boarding kennel would have to. I think we kind of need to maybe try to keep a differentiation between
Once you start doing that, then, I mean, you're gonna have to be very specific on the categories you're creating. The more exceptions you make, the more problems you're gonna have.
Where does
How
it
do you
stop
enforce
at?
that? Yeah,
Yeah, we faced that.
yeah.
Yeah, but you can't force everybody in the county that has a female that has a litter of pups to buy a kennel license either. I don't think that's the way
Well,
to go.
we do if they're keeping the pups. I mean, if they're gonna have 5 or more pups, or 5 or more dogs, that's considered a life, or a kennel.
Unless we change the ordinance to allow instead of 4, 5, or 6, or some
Sure.
number like
It's up
that.
to the county, yeah, it's up to the county board as to how you want that to read.
Well, one of the points that I had made about this, and I hope that I'm not the only one in this category, but there may be people, not only similar to myself, but there may be people that show dogs with AKC shows or whatever that might, and they're not a puppy mill or anything of the sort. And you know, as you pointed out, I think initially this ordinance was intended to not have puppy mills or have people producing dogs for that purpose in the county. And I agree with that. I don't think that's something that we would want to have here. If some other county or state wants them to do it or lets them do it, that's their business. But I think that people who want to have, and I have no idea what a reasonable number is, but it just seems to me that in this day and age, you know, years ago 4 might have been good, but in this day and age, I think people, statistically wide across the whole country, have more dogs than they used to have. And so in order to accommodate that, I would be personally in favor of increasing that number, but I don't know what number. Again, to me, we'd be pulling something out of the air.
I would think that might be all right for the country, but I don't want my neighbor to have 6 dogs in his backyard. That's where you get the nuisance.
Well, but you're living in town, and the
Yeah.
town ordinance covers that. We're talking about out in the county.
But a place like Belmont Acres or a subdivision, I mean, would be the county would have to enforce its ordinances on a subdivision, so.
It would, but that subdivision could have their own owners association within it that
Yeah.
could cover that.
Which Belmont Acres, and I don't live there, but I don't think they have bylaws that anybody enforces. They don't even have a homeowners association.
And then if you want 6, the next person come up with 1.8, the next person come up with 1.10. So where do you stop at?
I just, you know, I mean, personally, I'd like to see it to be more, but I don't know how many other people.
What's your number? What's your number?
He's not gonna say.
No, because I don't, as I said, I don't know that I could come up with. To me, it's like pulling a number out of the air. I might, if I said 6 or 7, maybe, you know, I don't know. I don't know what others would consider to be reasonable in a situation like that. You know, there's some people like Kyle, he doesn't have any dogs. He doesn't want a dog.
Nope, and one bite me once, family last time.
You need a dog.
No, I don't.
But there's other people.
Well, I don't want to separate or anything, but like I said, country's one thing, but in town's something else.
Right. Well, this is primarily for.
I think 4 is even too much for in town.
I probably would agree with you in most cases in the town, that would be the case.
What do we do on other animals? It's 1 animal unit per acre, isn't it?
For farm animals, there is, of course, things like that.
How many farms have a dozen or more cats running around to keep the mice down and so forth?
Yeah, I think Manila was pretty adamant cats not a problem because they are, you know, there's feral cats out there. I mean, you know, they were saying herding cats, how do you herd cats?
We're trying to do it with the animal control right now, but I don't want cats.
I have
Not
cats.
not with anybody blessing, that was,
I have cats come and take up residence in my barn from time to time. They might live there 6 months or a year, and then they're gone, and
right, they get eaten
Somebody
by
else-
coyotes, or, yeah, like I said, they go off and live on their own because they're feral, and,
I got plenty of food for the cats. There's mice running everywhere.
yeah. Yeah, that was never an issue as far as cats or any other animals. They have an ordinance governing them.
Well, I don't know what else to say. The number of dogs seems to be the primary issue here. I don't know that we've gone through the rest of this. If we want to wait until, study it some more and wait till next month, I guess I'm fine with that. I don't know if this is something that we need to take care of necessarily today. I think it's something that, is the whole purpose of us in reviewing these ordinances is to get them updated and make them current with conditions and circumstances that exist today in the county. So that's what we're doing here.
I don't have a copy of the ordinance, but I'm going back, I don't know if there's age-specific requirements, if an animal is being kept, or if a female has a litter of 5 puppies, that person automatically has to go get a kennel license.
I think that they're going to keep them, as pets.
So is there an age restriction or you could have somebody that has a dog a year old that you say, hey, I'm not keeping it, I'm going to get rid of it Is there an age-specific restriction, or how do they do that, Jim?
I'd have to read the ordinance, to be honest, I haven't read it in a long time, but I think that's where discretion comes in. Somebody has a litter of pups, so they have 6 puppies. If they're going to keep the puppies and that's going to be a regular part of that family, then they probably have to get a kennel ordinance or a kennel license. But if, within 6 months or after the weaning period has passed, they're going to sell the pups or give them away, then there's really no enforcement there because there's no long-term commitment for keeping more than 5 puppies.
Here's another situation that we might want to consider. In the realm that I'm involved in with my hunting dogs, this is something that's primarily for competition, and there are professional handlers that travel around the country to different field trials. All over the country they go. They have like a circuit that they follow. They have customers that put dogs with them. Let's say I have 5 dogs with professional handler A, and he has the dog in his possession. I still own the dog. He has the dog in his possession from 1st of July until middle of April. So he would bring the dog back to me because he don't want to keep it during the months of the year when there aren't any field trials on. So I had 5 dogs, let's say, in this example. I would have 5 dogs for a couple months, 3 months, whatever it would be. How does that interface with this ordinance?
Again, I'd have to read the ordinance. Give you that ordinance. I'll take a peek.
I don't know that it says anything in here about it. I can't recall that it does.
We tried to be somewhat vague in
Well,
its description, but
most of it's in the definitions, I think, are in the beginning, but I'm not doing that right now, but there are people like me that do that. That's how these professional handlers earn their living. They have maybe 19, 20 dogs that they travel around the country with. They've got a huge horse trailer with 4 horses in it, and big boxes in it to put the dogs in and all their other equipment. They got a rig that probably costs $120,000, $130,000 when they're all done.
I think if you're talking, my guess is, if you're talking a temporary arrangement like you're describing, I don't think there's going to be any reasonable enforcement.
reasonable expectation that there could be an enforcement of the kennel ordinance. Because it's temporary.
Sounds like a circus coming to town.
Basically, we're looking for somebody who's going to, they live on a particular piece of property and they've got more than 5 dogs, 5 or more dogs,
I don't know, I guess one of the other things that I brought up about this is we don't have much in here about all these other animals. Is that something we want to consider? Is it a nuisance or a problem? Somebody has 130 cats, and only 130 cats?
That would probably fall under animal cruelty. I mean, if you've got animal control saying, these cats are starving or dying or diseased and not being cared for, that's a criminal matter, and that's where I come in, and I have done that.
Okay, if you had 100 cats and they were all well cared for.
We have nothing to regulate it. Congratulations, you're at a nut job if you're able to take care of it.
Clean up the
I
mess.
I understand those things. My question simply is, do we want to have anything in the ordinance that covers those kinds of things?
I don't think so. When
I
you've got,
mean, because you could look at the dogs the same way and say that somebody has 7 dogs that are all well cared for, good facilities, and there's no problem at all. I mean, how do you differentiate?
well, like I said, the reason behind creating that ordinance, and it was a long time coming, were these porters that were throughout the county. We probably had 3 or 4 in different parts of the county. That was a real problem. And this was crafted to address that problem.
Right.
Times change through the years. I mean, I think the fact that this ordinance has been in existence has been a deterrent for people not to become porters. And so I think it's had an effect, a beneficial effect along those lines. But, if you want to tweak it,
And we have some people right now with kennel licenses, some that have applied just recently, that have a dozen or more dogs.
yeah. And there's a responsibility that they're willing to take by having this ordinance in place.
Well, I guess my suggestion at the moment would be to table it and we'll think about it some more next month. Maybe we can finalize on it. If everybody's agreeing with that. We'll move on to the claims. Everybody has a copy of the claims in front of them. If you want to look at them, they're here. Looks like everything has to do with inspections that were made. Looks like there were a lot of inspections made during September, so I think that pretty well accounts for it. Anybody want to make a motion to approve the claims?
Jim's got a question. He wanted to know if you needed any more.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I'll make a motion to pay the claims.
Second. Joyce, call the roll.
Curtis?
Yes.
Sure?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Anderson?
Any old business? Any new business? Motion to adjourn. Ernie Curtis, second Dan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?